Thank you for that very kind introduction. So I'm delighted to be here with you today, Peter. Peter is the co-founder and CEO of Silo AI, one of Europe's leading private AI labs. Silo was acquired by AMD last year, which is a real kind of standout moment in the European AI ecosystem. It was the largest private AI lab acquisition in Europe at a valuation of $665 million. So in this conversation, we're going to take a look at where AI is headed, crucially, how large organizations can adopt it. We're going to talk a little bit about Peter's journey as an entrepreneur and a scientist. And I think we're really going to dig into also where we are in the cycle. There's been a couple of moments just in the last couple of days. It's 1,000 days since ChatGPT launched. Anthropic settled a major class action suit yesterday, which is, I think, really interesting in terms of content creation and where we are with that. And really, we're going to talk a little bit about where we are in the cycle and about the real value of AI. So we are going to be taking questions on Slido. Please do post those if we have time. So looking forward to some of those questions. So Peter, over to you. I think maybe first question is just for people, there might be some people in the room who aren't aware of Silo AI. So I'd love you to introduce it and explain really what makes your approach to development different from sort of some of the other big global players.
Yeah, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here. And indeed, I mean, we sold last year, but I'm still running Silo, and Silo is still an independent private AI lab running out of Europe and out of Finland with offices across Europe. So, I mean, we do have a bit of a different background compared to many of the frontier labs. So Silo was founded end of 2017. I personally left a professorship with my research group to set up Silo as a private AI lab at the time. We're bootstrapped, which I think significantly impacted the journey that we've done from 2017 to eventually an exit in 2024. For us, that really meant that we built out a world-class team of AI scientists together with customers up until 2022 when we raised a bit of capital.
Yeah.
And throughout, we've sort of been customer-centric, built out strategic R&D partnerships with some of the leading companies across the world. Not only large language models and Gen AI, which obviously is what many are doing today, and transformer-based models everywhere. We kicked off with self-driving, so that was where we focused first, and then we worked on a wide range of different, say, embedded and edge use cases around smart devices, ranging from companies like Microsoft to Philips and so forth. And then only in the past few years, as we raised a bit of capital, we built out our own model serving platform or model development and deployment platform, as well as open source language models, especially covering European languages. And we did so on AMD GPUs, and that obviously we were one of the first companies in the world to prove throughput scaling on AMD GPUs, and that obviously was one of the key reasons to join forces eventually with AMD. But as I alluded to in the beginning, we're basically still an AI lab. We're doing what we've always done, so we're solving the most challenging AI problems together with customers, and now, of course, just doing that with AMD and AMD customers, and that means the frontier labs that are building on AMD compute platforms where we are basically ensuring that they succeed in building state-of-the-art AI on AMD GPUs in that case.
So we're seeing startups in this space attracting huge amounts of investment, huge amounts of capital pouring in, significant valuations. Can you just walk us through what was the decision to bootstrap rather than try and raise a lot of capital and...
Yeah, that's been a very common question, and I don't think bootstrapping in itself. I guess it eventually sits in the very beginning. It sat in the ownership strategy that we had and the approach we took to building a company for the long term. But ultimately, I mean, that doesn't fit every company and every strategy. So for us, it was sort of obvious, given the maturity of the market. I mean, if you look at the AI companies out there, there are not many AI companies today that were founded before 2018, 2017, right? So when we looked at the market in 2017, the reality was that, you know, it was very difficult to build a product business purely around AI or a business purely around AI. So eventually, you know, being bootstrapped, we had to focus on the parts of the market and the approaches to market that created most value.
Yeah.
And eventually that allowed us to basically, you know, take the company from 0 to 200 AI scientists and eventually then approach the market with product with a specific sort of go-to-market motion that we believed in and we saw that the market had eventually sort of opened up for.
Okay, so it was a go-to-market strategy once you had a very clear kind of proposition with your product. And just kind of reflecting on that, the acquisition of AMD, which is a chip manufacturer or infrastructure company, what was the moment where you were motivated to actually take this capital? Like, what was the, was that difficult? Because that differed from your kind of original vision of building this independent European AI flagship.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's always a big decision, right? But I mean, I think ultimately I would kind of disagree in that we never changed our mission. Our mission has always been to build a European AI flagship. And the way we basically looked at joining forces with AMD was basically a next chapter on that same journey. Because basically we're still running a lab that is headquartered in Europe, and we just have more resources. We get to solve more challenging problems, more ambitious problems at a larger scale. So in that sense, joining forces with a company like AMD sort of allowed us to actually take the next step on that journey. And then, I mean, to me, we've built a strong value base and a company culture that stands on that value base, and with that wanted always to build the world's best workplace for AI scientists. And I think the core element in joining forces with AMD was really to ensure that there's alignment on the value base and the culture. And I think, you know, that's obviously a longer story, but I think, you know, that was the core sort of, you know, thing that I wanted to ensure that is aligned before we actually join forces and continue on the journey that we've always been on.
So you just used the phrase, you want to build the world's leading organization for research, AI organization or AI lab for research scientists. There's a huge war for talent going on now for, you know, AI PhDs, AI scientists. Like, what does that look like? Is it a cultural thing as much as anything else?
Yeah, I think it's certainly a culture thing. I mean, that's always been our sort of employee value proposition and continues to be. The world's best scientists want to work with the world's best scientists, and they want to solve the most challenging problems. And eventually you need to create an environment that supports that. So, you know, that's what we've always done. Obviously, the labor market was a little bit different, say in 2017 up until, say, 2023, 2024. But at the same time, I think there's a tremendous opportunity, especially here in Europe, here in the Nordics, and also here in Denmark, in that, you know, there's a lot of academic talent. We're well known for the universities, the research group, the individual researchers that are contributing to world-class AI research, and the sort of you know, talent war in Europe is not as fierce as it is elsewhere. And I think we benefited from that, and I think companies here locally can benefit from that as well.
So let's dig into the broader picture around where we are with AI at the moment. There was a piece of research this week, which a lot of people lost their minds around, from that suggested that 95% of generative AI pilots are failing within large organizations. So I'd love to get your take in terms of, like, why is this happening, and what are the common mistakes that organizations make? How can organizations actually deploy this technology in a way that's meaningful with real world outcomes?
Yeah, and I mean, there's obviously been this MIT report result circulating during the past few days, and I'm not actually too surprised by this result as such. And then, of course, you need to basically break it into pieces to understand what it means. And this is not too different from what happened in 2016-17 in the previous AI wave. And at the same time, you can just see so much value being created today in terms of productivity and also in terms of revenue growth. But basically, I think, well, it's a bit of a longer sort of perspective to this. But I think the core element really is to understand the difference from like productivity gains and revenue impact. And the reality is that those that are investing in building, not buying, but building AI, they are the ones that are embedding and integrating into their own products so that they can sell more and generate revenue with that. And that's a very different sort of activity compared to the ones that are basically just supposed to buy the best products on the market that embed and integrate AI into them, be it ChatGPT or some of the other products out there. And I think what we saw in the market in 2016-17, which was partly why we as Silo steered so much towards R&D initiatives, was that this enterprise market gets confused when you should build and when you should actually buy. And that's also the result in the MIT report. You can see that most of the failures happen when enterprises build rather than buy. And most of the there's a much larger portion of success stories when you buy rather than build. So I think this is really the core element that is easily happening in these hype waves, and eventually sort of what you can see now happening is that more and more companies are embedding it into their product offering and eventually basically successfully then offering AI to the market through a scalable product.
Okay, well that then begs the question for people in the audience who are working in enterprise, like what advice would you have for them in terms of when they build and when they buy? Like, what are the kind of like the basic questions they should be asking themselves?
No, I don't think there's sort of one answer to that question. I mean, I believe, you should ensure that you should build at the core of your business. You should acknowledge that it's going to be expensive and it's going to take a long time. It usually starts and it never stops. Yeah. And usually your focus should really be on building competitive edge. So this is the sort of core, most important problem that you're tackling is building that product and AI at the core of that product, or be it a service or a process or whatever, but sitting at the core of your business. And that's usually an ideal spot where you want to build AI at the core of your business and differentiate from your competitors and build competitive edge. And then, that's actually, in many cases, the tiny part of the market. Like, not every company, not in Denmark, not in Finland, not in Europe, not in the US, should be building their own models and their own AI. And actually, majority of companies, and for the majority of problems within these enterprises, you should actually be buying solutions, buying products that are embedding AI into them. Be it products for legal, for healthcare, for, I don't know, we're going to have Lovable on the stage tomorrow, yep. So software and so forth. This is where, as an enterprise, I would focus on being good at buying the best products on the market and educating my own workforce to make use of those tools and products.
Okay, so we're seeing a little bit of a, should we say, a disagreement between like the AI maximists and some people who are kind of like slightly doubtful about the benefits. And they're the people who've been pushing this MIT review report. We're seeing a lot of surging valuations around some AI companies. The price-to-earning ratios are kind of reminiscent of the dot-com era. What metrics, what KPIs should investors or executives, people working in enterprises, focus on to be able to distinguish between this kind of like the difference between the hype and things that are actually going to make a difference to their business?
Well, let me maybe approach this from a little bit of a different angle. I mean, because enterprise is a very, there's no one approach that any enterprise in the world should look at this. But I mean, ultimately, I think everything is a product question, and ultimately every AI company and every AI solution is a product. There might sit a model at the core of that product. I even think that OpenAI is a product company, not an AI company, and I said that at the beginning of 2023 as a key reason why the first launch of ChatGPT was so successful. It provided a user experience which was just much better. Not that they had actually the best model on the market at the time. So when building, I would just be focused on design, product design, and user experience, and then obviously you want to tap into the best models on the market. And this is not only a sort of frontier AI question. I mean, we see AI being embedded and integrated everywhere, from vehicles to lawn mowers to vacuum cleaners to toothbrushes and so forth. So it's everywhere. And in the same way, we're actually seeing this current wave sort of push through the frontier labs, but we see multiple smaller waves coming now in new modalities, and that's modalities that are, or industries that are strong in Europe. So we have life sciences, we have automotive and robotics, we have gaming, and these all three are strong industries in Europe where we are at the moment seeing transformer-based AI models being put at the core of their businesses and transforming them. So, I think there is an opportunity elsewhere, not only in the frontier labs and the companies that are embedding frontier lab models today.
Okay, I just want to sort of like maybe continue with this kind of like parallel of where we are with the new large successful AI companies, and sort of some of the parallels of the last sort of like boom, should we say, of the last sort of like 10, 15 years. So we've seen this kind of rise of superstar companies that really are outstripping the competition, and there's, second place is a long way behind. There was an interesting piece of research came out recently from The Information. They have a generative AI database, and it showed that in less than 3 years, OpenAI, Anthropic, 16 other startups had collectively generated more than 18.5 billion annualized revenue, which is great, right? That's very, very fast growth. But there were only two companies, OpenAI and Anthropic, capturing 88% of that value. So I guess the question is AI, like search and like sort of social, likely to become like a winner-take-all technology?
I think the logic is very different, but the outcome might have some similarities. And yes, I mean, what we are seeing now is that, as you alluded to, a lot of applications, or the application layer basically stands on top of a few models. And yes, I mean, the best models are basically the ones that are dominating. But at the same time, I think we're constantly seeing innovation across different specific use cases, and also and especially for different modalities. And I wouldn't underestimate the importance of modality, because ultimately, models for life sciences, models for, say, automotive, models for gaming, weather models, and so forth, they benefit from different data, and they will not be in the same way sort of dominated by these sort of few players, at least in the beginning. And then I think it's a commercial question. Do you actually build a platform? And I think we have many good model builders in the world, but then the question is, do you get to distribution? And I think that's where eventually we come to some of the similar dynamics where you have network effects or distribution basically play in allowing a few models to get much better than others.
Okay, so I am legally obliged to now ask you the question about AGI, because we're having a conversation about AI. There's obviously a lot of kind of, talk about, some of the people leading these large companies are talking about, they're quote close to getting to AGI. Is that a concept you believe in? And if you do, like, how far away are we? What's your sense of it?
Yeah, I mean, that's the common question. Not my favorite question, but the common question. I don't think we have a good definition of AGI or superintelligence. I think, we're throwing around numbers for a concept that no one has actually agreed on how to define. So that obviously does not really make sense. I personally think that basically the way that I, especially as a researcher, previously defined AGI and superintelligence, which is something that is superhuman and beyond what our human capabilities, I don't think the current approaches will take us there. That has nothing to do with the fact that this is going to still continue to create tremendous value. But I think superintelligence as such is not really what these transformers are taking us to, and ultimately, like, a researcher's viewpoint on transformers basically is that you have token predictors, you have sequence models, it's sequences of words or tokens. And how do you basically build these models? You build them by teaching them with data, and that data is basically the logic you build into these models. So obviously, sort of, that to me at least is very hard to connect with anything that would mimic superintelligence.
I have to ask you also, Europe, US, like where do you see Europe in this kind of race to AGI? We so often hear that the US is leading, China's very close behind. Like, where do you see Europe fitting into this picture, and how do we catch up?
Yeah, that's a big question. So I'd like to take two perspectives to that. One is that, as I alluded to earlier, you need distribution, and we have good talent, and we have proof points of building some of the best open source models, both in image and text generation, for instance. But we don't have proof points of actually succeeding in distribution. So I think, as Draghi highlighted in his report a bit more than a year, less than a year ago, we don't have the tech platforms. We haven't created more than 100+ billion companies during the past 50 years. The US has created all of their plus 1 trillion companies during the past 50 years. And I think, of course, that would be something that Europe should focus on, but that's not going to change in the coming few years. So what I actually believe we should focus on is building sort of strong talent ecosystems, and that's what I think is happening in many places. But Paris is a good example where you have a strong academic cluster. They've attracted strong R&D players like Meta and Google and OpenAI and so forth. And then eventually you can see gradually startups being set up like Mistral, Kyotai, Poolside, and so forth. And then ultimately, what I indicated previously already, I actually think while we don't have the big tech platforms, we actually have the tech platforms or the platforms for life sciences, for automotive, for gaming. And I think it's just so important that Europe succeeds in putting AI and large-scale AI workloads at the core of these traditional enterprises, if you wish, because otherwise someone else will basically transform them with the latest AI models, the transformer-based models that are being put into use in life sciences, in automotive, and in gaming, for instance.
You mentioned what's happening in France. Like, so many of the French AI companies are open source. Like, do you think that offers competitive advantage? It's obviously where Meta's sort of placing its bet as well.
Yeah, I think open source is extremely important, but at the same time, today it's really not a business model on its own for most companies, and it's actually, I would say that the sort of open source business model logic is very different compared to open source software, and that implies that if you as an AI company take that approach, you need to have a very deliberate approach to eventually commercialize and get to distribution. At the same time, I think it's just so important that there are open source models built for the different, say, cultures and values and languages of the world. And these sovereign AI initiatives are happening across the world today. And that especially because basically the individual enterprises that want to build a model that is adapted for healthcare or for legal or for other domains and own and control that model, that requires there to exist good, high quality open source models. And while I think there are good alternatives in terms of closed models today for the smaller, say, languages and nations, there are not actually always good alternatives among open source models for be it Danish or Finnish or some other small language. And that's partly also what Silo has been contributing to and continues to contribute to at the moment.
Peter, I'm afraid we're getting kicked off the stage. Thank you so much for chatting with us today. Congratulations on being a European leader, and we look forward to seeing what your group does in the coming years. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.